Our next speaker is in a very powerful position to influence any infrastructure initiative that we'd like to see passed by Congress. As the lead Democrat on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Representative DeFazio understands how to achieve bipartisan results. He's plain spoken when he says that an infrastructure bill is not going to happen unless Congress finds a way to pay for it. We hope that his bipartisan approach and work with Chairman Schuster comes to fruition and that APTA is here to support him. Please welcome Edward McGlone, the Public Affairs Director at Lane Transit in Eugene, Oregon, who will introduce Ranking Member Peter DeFazio.
I hope that clap was just preemptive for Peter because I'm nothing special. But thank you very much. It is my distinct pleasure to represent Lane Transit District in welcoming Congressman DeFazio here today. Congressman DeFazio is really the foremost voice on transportation in Congress. He's been in Congress since he was elected in 1986, making him the most senior elected official for Oregon's congressional delegation. And in that role, he has had his hands on just about every single reauthorization that has slowly crept through Congress in that period of time. He has served on 4 of the 6 modal subcommittees, and he has really distinguished himself as a straight shooter, an honest guy, and someone who you don't want to be on the other side of. Mr. DeFazio is not only the foremost member on transportation, but he's also the most often correct member on transportation, or at least we are instructed that that is the case, and we are very pleased about that as well. He has done very well for us as an industry, helping to steer more and more money towards transit, increasing funding in the formula programs, and inserting language in the FAST Act that ensures that if the gas tax receipts go up higher than predicted, that the money flows back through formula instead of requiring further appropriation by legislators. As his home district, we've been very fortunate to benefit from his support as well. Under guidance from him and support at the congressional level, LTD has been proud to build 3 lines of bus rapid transit, offer more than 10 million boardings a year in a community of only 130,000 in Eugene and 300,000 in our service area, and ranking in the top 25 nationwide in productivity. And because of Mr. DeFazio's support, we're able to deliver that kind of service to our community. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Congressman Peter DeFazio.
Thanks for having me here today, and thanks for the work you do every day to help Americans get to work and get to the grocery store and increase their mobility without adding to traffic congestion. I never tell jokes, but my staff came up with one, and I'm going to actually read it because I laughed. A bus filled with politicians on the campaign trail was driving through the countryside. Driver lost control, crashed into a ditch. Farmer living nearby heard the horrible crash, rushed out to discover the wreckage, finding the politicians. He buried them. When the police arrived, they said to the farmer, "So you buried all the politicians. Were they all dead?" The farmer answered, "Some said they weren't, but you know how politicians lie." Pretty good. Yeah, I had to laugh too. So anyway, you know, it's an interesting time. Of course, there's a lot of expectation. I've done an infinite number of interviews about whether or not there is going to be a major transportation infrastructure bill. You know, Chairman Schuster, you know, now Bill's retiring. He's come out strongly for a 15-cent gas tax. And it's not overwhelmingly popular in his caucus. Paul Ryan has come out and said, no way, no how, no more money for transportation. In fact, Paul thinks we shouldn't be involved in transportation at all. It wasn't part of Ayn Rand's philosophy. So, you know, and obviously Brady and McCarthy follow Ryan. So the only way we're going to get there, and I said, Bill wants to sit down and talk about a bill and talk about revenues. I said, well, we don't do revenues. That goes to Ways and Means, and Brady hasn't. There's been one witness in one hearing in 7 years on infrastructure in the Ways and Means Committee. 5 minutes, 7 years. So you know, I'm not holding my breath that something's going to happen, and you know, and I was invited to the White House with Bill, and we're having a discussion and talking about various options, and Trump finally did say, 25 cents a gallon. And, Thune looks at him and says, Democrats will attack you. I said, no, I'll stand right next to him. I'll stand in front of him. We need to do this. And after the discussion went on from there, and I said, Mr. President, the only way this is going to happen is if you come out publicly and strongly and you push for this every day, because the Republican leadership in Congress does not want to do this. So that's kind of where we're at. But let's talk about what they have proposed, which is why I thought that joke was very appropriate. They say they support transit, but they say it's a local issue. Actually, they are incredibly hostile to transit through all of their actions to date. 2 consecutive budget requests to eliminate the Capital Investment Grant Program. That's $2.3 billion a year in cuts. Still refusing to sign grant agreements for all the larger transit New Start and core capacity projects. Proposes slash FRA funding that's necessary to improve commuter rail PTC safety plans, which are required by law. Slash Amtrak by more than 50%. Last week, we got Tiger Grant winners, a very strange dispersion of funds, and only 4% went to transit. It's averaged 20 previously. They called me very proud that they're putting $8 million into a little tiny depressed town up in the mountains in the very northeast corner of my district. I said, well, thanks, Madam Secretary. That's a lot of money for that little town. I said I did have this other project, and which would have served tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. But anyway, some think that they have spread the money out mostly into red areas. That's one of my redder areas, and also in a way that it's not going to look like it's dealing with significant projects. I don't know about that. I don't know if they're that smart. Now we're hung up over the Gateway project. The president wants to apparently trade Gateway for his stupid wall. How that's going to work out in the omnibus this week, we don't know. They've also found other ways to basically to the detriment of transit. I've got a lot of complaints about project grant agreements at FTA are moving at less than a glacial pace. Rules change without notice, new bureaucracy, and yet the Trump infrastructure plan is cutting red tape, eliminating regulatory burdens that delay infrastructure. Sadly, for transit, they seem to be going the opposite direction. Actually, all of they're claiming that we don't need any more money. In fact, they're relying on a guy named Hudson who works at some, mercenary right-wing think tank. And he wrote 2 years, not 10. And the only problem is that it takes 10 years to do a transportation project, 10 years, and we could get it down to 2. And he cites 5 or 6 very prestigious reports, except every one of those 6 reports comes to the opposite conclusion. The problem is funding and continuity of funding, and not environmental review or other bureaucratic impediments. In fact, 93% of the transportation projects where federal funding is involved go forward under what's called a categorical exclusion. Here, fill out this one sheet, you're done. 4% go through, an environmental analysis, takes a little longer. Yeah, and then the biggest, most controversial projects, they go through a full EIS, which on average is taking about 3 years. For the largest, most expensive projects, I don't think that is inordinate. So it's all a lie that somehow streamlining is going to take care of our funding problems. The only thing that's going to take care of our funding problems is more funding, plain and simple. That's it. Now, I did get a provision in the FAST Act, which was bitterly opposed, but they did need Democratic votes, that said any additional funding allocated by Congress flows through the existing formulas. No other action is necessary. So, that's the sort of the one hope you can hold out. We could have, the best place to have done all this would have been in the tax bill, $3 trillion of reduced federal revenues. They could have said, well, hey, we're cutting your taxes by $3 trillion, and we're just going to raise a few $100 billion over here with a long overdue increase in user fee, the gas tax. Didn't happen. Very unfortunate, but that provision is still there. So if somehow, some way we can get additional funds levered through, then we'll be in a good place. There are other provisions of their so-called infrastructure plan that I find highly objectionable. 20-80 split instead of 80-20. The whole idea that they would actually penalize jurisdictions that have raised revenues in the past. They want you to raise revenues right now. So my state, which raised a lot of money last year, would take I think 30% hit in terms of competing for 20-80 grants. California, which raised many billions of dollars 2 years ago, would take a 60% hit in their scoring because they did it 2 years ago. And then the 25 states that haven't done a damn thing for a decade or more, well, they all get 100% credit for doing it now if they do a nickel now. So for those who've already been maintaining their infrastructure, you get penalized. For those who say, oh, now I'd like federal money, they get bonus points. And then, of course, there would be a rural program, loosely defined, where there would be 100% federal match, but probably none of that would go to transit. I've offered as many revenue options as I can think of. Those people who are apologists or want to avoid the subject say, well, we got to have a vehicle miles traveled. Yeah, we will someday. We're doing pilots now. We're trying to work out the kinks. We had some of the foremost advocates for that before the committee I think it was last week or the week before, and they said, yeah, we're at least 10 years out from being able to generally apply vehicle miles traveled. We need more pilots. We need to, see how we're going to integrate this data and do it. I mean, one of the biggest barriers is it wouldn't be fair to just say, well, everybody's going to pay, a dime or 15 cents, whatever, per mile. Because, someone who jumps onto 205 in Portland, which is backed up for hours at rush hour, is adding to the burden in a disproportionate way from someone in Eastern Oregon who has to drive 25 miles to get to the feed store. They should not be paying the same price. You have to have congestion pricing, time of day pricing, if you're going to impact the system. If you're going to do that, then you know where people are at all times, and that makes some people nervous, shall we say. A lot of them live in my district, and it'll be sometime after they pry the gun from their cold, dead hand that they get their mileage data. So, we've done pilots in Blumenauer's district. The people are just thrilled. The government wants to know where they are. It's like, oh, that's great. So a little different attitude in Portland. I guess Earl was already here. And Portlandia is a reality show. It's not made up stuff. So, we need you. We need your advocacy, your support. You've stolen one of my most talented staff, Ward McCarriger, down back there, Ward. I won't hold it against you too much because I know he's going to help you more effectively communicate and push harder on these issues, talking about the incredible benefits of transit. I just get so tired of hearing, well, I pay gas tax. Why do those people get a free ride? I said, you want them all to get out of the bus and get into their individual vehicles? What do you think your commute's going to be like? I said, and besides that, a lot of those people have cars too, and they drive too, but they're using transit in specific ways. Yeah, and some of them don't have cars, but they're paying tickets, and they're saying, well, we should look at the privatizing transit or do this. I live in a town. Eugene had a private bus system until, God, I don't know, sometime when I was in graduate school, I guess, or a little after, and it was miserable. It didn't work. It lost money, and ultimately went belly up. Of course, there is and there are no transit systems in the world, except Hong Kong claims they make money, that don't operate without some assistance because of the extraordinary public benefits, and then the other benefits that you can sell too, in terms of if you're doing transit-oriented development. I mean, if you're doing a fixed route, or if you're doing a BRT route or something, boy, suddenly, oh, that real estate's worth a lot more money and stuff sprouts out. And you look at the returns you're getting there. So there is a great story to tell about the benefits of transit. There is no, and there should be no tension between, between the people, the surface sector that isn't transit and you. We pretty much settled that, I think, a couple authorizations ago when we were having a huge fight in Safety Lou over the split for transit. We've been pretty stable there. But now we have some, people back in the White House who seem to don't know that they lost that debate in '06 and lost it again when Micah was chairman and doing MAP 21. And they're coming back again. So we've got to push back really, really, really hard. Beat them and be in a great position to help advocate for additional funding and for the resources you need to update your fleets and to build out new options for people who are stuck in congestion. So with that, I was asked if I'd take a few questions, and I said, sure. So who's got a question?
So, Rob Healy with APTA, and thanks for being here, Mr. DeFazio. So as you look into your crystal ball, do you see Red Sox in the World Series?
You knew I was a Red Sox.
I know. But seriously, I mean, do you think, as a non-appropriator, do you think that this budget deal helps? Do we actually get an appropriations bill for 19 before the election? Do you think that's possible? And similarly, I mean, on a gas tax increase, I mean, do you see any openings, lame duck, next year, this year, any of those things?
Well, I mean, in terms of the omnibus, as I said, it's not settled. The largest, potential transit project, the New York, the tunnels is in play, and whether we'll get any money for that or not, I don't know. On the stupid wall, there's a great video online, I think, about how walls work, and it's like they have this guy has a pickup truck and he has a giant air can and he's shooting the drugs over the wall. They have trucks that they drive up that have like these ramps and then they drive over the wall. Although they did a great picture of one guy who got high centered on the wall in a Jeep. And, of course, they go under the wall. My brother was in Hong Kong when it was still Brit and China, and people wanted to escape from communist China from the new territories into Hong Kong. They had two 20-foot tall fences with concertina wire. They ran dogs in between. They used lethal force, and it cost $2,000 to get over. It was very well organized. So the absurdity and the insanity of spending tens of billions of dollars on a wall is just extraordinary. So I don't know how that works out. Other than that, we're going to get a small amount of money for infrastructure writ large, meaning everything from VA. I mean, I think we're looking at maybe $2 billion or $3 billion in transportation in that bill. So that's not exactly a panacea. Chairman Schuster is somewhat optimistic about the lame duck. I don't see it. I can't see that if the Republicans lose the House that suddenly Paul Ryan's going to let a funding bill go through. He'd rather just say, I don't believe in it, and you do it when you take over, and we'll run against you on it. I'm not optimistic about the lame duck.
Alan Wilkin with the Wilkin Group. As the hopefully future chairman of the committee, assuming that the Senate stays about the same where it is today, as chairman, how do you view what's going to change after November?
Well, Richie Neal and I have talked a lot. He will chair the Ways and Means Committee, and Richie has supported my Penny for Progress bill. He supported my barrel tax idea. He knows and believes that we need to invest more in infrastructure, so he's willing to go there. There may be some cold feet or reluctance on the part of some of my leadership, but we're going to have a leadership race. And my unequivocal price for whomever I might support to be our speaker is going to be, you've got to allow us to move through a meaningful increase in spending for infrastructure, or I'm voting for the other person, whoever it is. So we'll see. But I mean, it's time to stop messing around with this and get it done. And the statistics are pretty amazing. In all the states that have raised revenues, mostly gas tax, some have done a rack tax, some have done other things. Nobody has lost their election. In fact, the only two people who lost in a state that had a major increase were two Republican state senators in New Jersey, and I'm sure it's a total coincidence, but they lost and they voted against it. So, the American people get it, and they need to see. They also need to see that the money is going to be well spent, which to me means bringing back, congressionally designated, authorized, priority local projects, or whatever the hell we're going to call them. But that's one way to show people the potential benefits. So that's also very high on my agenda.
Congressman, APT has come out strongly in support of the gas tax ideas, the ones floated by the Chamber of Commerce and yourself as well. Some would say, and we're in support, but some would say that the gas tax is regressive. I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that. Some, perhaps within your own party, might say that. I would say that's why the gas tax is not for roads alone, and that's one of the arguments there. But if you, what would be your approach to someone who would have that attitude, and how can we turn them around?
Well, if you look at, you want to talk about subsidies. Are we subsidizing transit? Yeah. Are we subsidizing rural road infrastructure? Yeah, even bigger. You can't produce revenues out there. So the gas tax is incredibly valuable for farm to market, forest to market, for people to get around out there. They also, unfortunately, many of them tend to drive older, less fuel-efficient vehicles. I understand that, but they also are avoiding damage and other problems that come with giant potholes and or being rerouted because a bridge is closed, et cetera, et cetera. So I just haven't seen. I mean, a large portion of my district is rural. My district is a total swing district. Hillary won by 554 votes. But I'm not afraid of the gas tax, and I haven't seen that it's going to be a huge negative, for me. And if it's not a negative for me, that means there aren't, being one of the most marginal districts that Democrats currently hold, or the most marginal, they shouldn't be afraid. Anything else? Okay, great. All right, well, thanks very much. Have a good conference.